The courtyard at Marlowe Estate had never looked so pristine. Cream-colored linens swept over the tables. Delicate floral arrangements of white roses and sprigs of lavender offered a subtle fragrance, and the late summer sun poured down with gentle warmth. Queen Consort Clarissa Hawthorne had asked for simplicity. No speeches, no excessive attention, just a quiet celebration with family and friends. After all, 78 was not a milestone anyone expected fireworks for least of all Clarissa. Still, the palace had spared no detail because when it came to the Queen, dignity was always served with elegance. King Alastair had taken particular care this year. He rarely concerned himself with birthdays or anniversaries, but Clarissa's presence in his life, especially after the turbulence of their earlier years, had become the soft thread that held him together. He arrived first, inspecting the layout with a frown, adjusting a name card here, a fork there. When the guests began to trickle in, he stood at Clarissa's side, greeting each one with that reserved warmth only those closest to the crown had. Come to recognize their son, Prince Edward, arrived fashionably late from Berlin, stepping from the royal sedan with a tired smile and a tight schedule tucked under his arm. He embraced Clarissa with a quiet reverence, whispering something only she could hear before taking his seat beside Lord Percival, the ever-evasive cousin who was rarely spotted at royal gatherings unless there was a scandal to observe. Clarissa looked around the table once the final guest had arrived. This was her circle, slimmed by age, refined by history, and entirely her own. The luncheon unfolded gently. Staff moved like shadows, pouring chilled wine, setting down plates of roasted duck and delicate salad. Clarissa laughed more than usual. She allowed herself a moment to believe that the stormier chapters of royal life had finally passed. But then, as dessert was being prepared, a footman approached with something unexpected. It was a small parcel, wrapped in soft pearl paper and tied with a silk ribbon, the kind that carried intention. No sender's name was visible, but the envelope atop the package bore a single word in handwriting she hadn't seen in over a year: Clarissa. The footman said nothing and stepped back as she picked it up. She hesitated only briefly before untying the ribbon and lifting the lid. Inside was a music box, French, ornate, old. The craftsmanship was exquisite, too deliberate to be random. A delicate note rested inside the lid. Clarissa read it once, then closed her eyes for a moment before turning the key. The box began to play. The sound was soft and haunting, a lullaby. Not just any lullaby, but one she had hummed decades ago, late at night, behind closed nursery doors when no one else was listening. Her heart slowed. The tune curled in the air like smoke. Something in her chest tightened. She reached to close the lid. At the far end of the table, Prince Edward noticed. His smile vanished as he leaned forward. Clarissa said nothing. She placed the box back on the table and reached quietly for her glass. Around her, conversation stumbled, then resumed with forced lightness. The moment had passed, or so it appeared, but elsewhere, unnoticed, someone's camera had captured the moment, the flicker in her eyes, the silence, the music, and within hours, the first clip would begin to spread. Not among the press, not officially, but virally, quietly, sharply, and Clarissa, who had asked only for peace, now sat unknowingly at the center of something. By nightfall, the music box clip had already begun its silent crawl across the digital world. It first surfaced on a fringe gossip account, accompanied by no commentary, just the 17-second clip of Queen Clarissa opening the box, the tune playing faintly in the background, and the moment her hand paused on the lid as her face changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real, and that made it dangerous. By morning, the clip had been reposted, filtered, looped, and dissected. Online commentators slowed the footage to highlight Clarissa's fleeting look of recognition. Amateur lip readers insisted they could see Lord Percival mouthing something under his breath. Royal watchers examined the note's paper, font, even the shadow of its handwriting. But one detail everyone agreed on: the soft engraving on the lid that caught the light for just one frame, and the folded note inside, signed only with a simple M. Falding. The implication was immediate. Margot Ellery, the Duchess of Westvale. The woman who had once stood beside Prince Edward, smiled at galas, shaken hands in Clarissa's garden. Now exiled by choice, cloaked in Hollywood sheen and American independence, she had re-entered the royal orbit with a gift too precise to be accidental. Within the palace, the mood shifted from confusion to quiet alarm. Queen Clarissa said little. She rose earlier than usual, retreating into her study for long hours, paging through old letters, sketching thoughts in notebooks she never showed. She canceled 2 appearances that week without explanation and began walking the palace grounds. Alone, ignoring the press gathering just beyond the gates. Prince Edward, however, did not retreat. He moved quickly. After confirming the leak had not come from palace staff, every phone, every tablet checked, cleared, and sealed, he focused on the gift itself. He asked for the music box. Clarissa handed it to him wordlessly. He took it, apart gently, examining the mechanics, searching for clues. Nothing obvious, but the melody haunted him too. He had heard it once in a story his mother had told long ago, about a lullaby she sang to a child who had not lived long enough to see his first birthday. That was what chilled Edward. This wasn't a stunt. It was personal. Deeply, cruelly personal. He summoned his private team men who didn't wear uniforms but moved with the urgency of those who handled problems no one else could touch. Began tracing the origin of the video. Within 48 hours, they identified the source, a private drone, operated under a vendor hired for landscaping the event. The drone had hovered unnoticed, its camera lens small enough to evade the naked eye but sharp enough to catch everything. Edward was livid. He called the estate's head of security and demanded to know how a breach like that could occur under their watch. The man stammered apologies, citing blind spots in the perimeter. Edward cut him off, not with shouting, but with something worse: cold silence and direct dismissal. By evening, replacements were in place. Across the Atlantic, Margot Ellery offered no comment. Her publicist issued a vague statement wishing Queen Clarissa peace and celebration on her special day, a sentence that enraged Edward more than any direct insult ever could. Clarissa, for her part, never said whether she believed the gesture had been malicious, but Edward had made up his mind. This was not a coincidence. The timing, the tune, the video, it was too neat. And so, as social media burned with speculation and the palace closed ranks, Edward moved deeper into response mode. The world could gossip, but he would act. Quietly, precisely, the music box was placed in a locked drawer in the royal archive, and the game, whatever it was, had now begun. Prince Edward had never been known for emotion. Among the royal siblings, he was the calm one, the precise one, the man who never blinked during scrutiny, who made diplomacy look effortless and politics look dull. But this time, something had been disturbed beneath the surface. The incident with the music box wasn't just an insult. It was a calculated invasion into something sacred: his mother's grief, his family's past, and the fragile veil of stability the monarchy had so carefully rebuilt. He began his work in the shadows, quietly relocating to the palace's east wing where the walls were thicker and the corridors less trafficked. There, he assembled a discreet team not from palace staff, but from his own private circle: former intelligence officers, data analysts, and 2 loyal veterans from his military days. They operated without headlines or protocol, feeding him Nightly briefings like a general in wartime. The drone operator had been the first link. After 3 days of relentless investigation, they tracked him to a small PR firm based out of South London, a company with no obvious connection to the royal household, but with an interesting trail of contracts leading back to a California-based media agency. That agency, as Edward expected, had previous affiliations with Margot Ellery's production brand. The pattern was there, too careful to be denied. A courier had arrived at the Westvale residence just days before the party. Inside, reportedly, was a matching music box. Edward absorbed all of it in silence. He didn't pace. He didn't yell. He took his meeting seated, hands clasped, voice low. His goal wasn't to embarrass Margot publicly. It was to remind her and anyone else watching that the royal family did not forget. Not insults. Not wounds. And certainly not betrayal. King Alastair offered cautious support, though he warned his son not to act out of personal emotion. Edward gave a clipped nod and returned to his papers. He wasn't planning to shout into microphones. He was building a wall around the crown, quiet, invisible, impenetrable. Dominic Fairchild, Edward's most trusted advisor and a retired ambassador, was brought in to handle the diplomatic edge. He made calls to international foundations Margot had recently partnered with, casually mentioning the unfortunate optics of her name being tied to a royal controversy. Within days, 2 charitable appearances were postponed indefinitely. A documentary project she had been nurturing quietly lost a European co-sponsor. No statements were made. Nothing could be traced. Meanwhile, Queen Clarissa resumed public appearances, dressed in her usual elegance but with a slightly tighter smile. She stood tall at a charity event for grieving mothers, an appearance some considered coincidental, but others knew was deliberate. The press responded predictably, praising her grace under pressure. She made no mention of the gift nor the video. She didn't need to. Back in the palace, Edward continued his campaign. His team planted positive media coverage, subtly drawing attention back to Clarissa's decades of service, her dignity, her quiet sacrifice. Simultaneously, he instructed that any future events be closed to outside vendors, any gifts screened with heightened discretion. Trust had narrowed to a needle's width. Privately, Edward confided to Dominic that Margot had crossed a line she couldn't return from. Whether she had meant to or not no longer mattered. She had provoked a memory too painful and wrapped it in theater. And so, the palace wouldn't respond with press releases or pointed words. They would respond with absence, with closed doors, with a silence so complete it echoed. And Edward would ensure that silence was permanent. The palace never released a statement. Not one word was spoken in public about the gift, the video, or the name behind the elegant M. Instead, Prince Edward's answer came in the form of careful erasure doors that quietly closed, invitations that ceased arriving, and reputations that began to dim without notice. He understood that the greatest response wasn't noise but exclusion. And so, he crafted silence into a weapon. Margot Ellery's name began to disappear from agendas. Her upcoming charity appearance in Geneva was abruptly marked postponed, though no official reason was given. A streaming platform preparing to acquire her latest documentary suddenly pulled out, citing shifting priorities. The mentorship initiative she was building in partnership with a global women's foundation was handed off to another ambassador without fanfare. The message was unmistakable. Even if it was never written down, she had touched something sacred, and now she would be made to vanish softly. Back at Marlowe Estate, Queen Clarissa returned to routine with deliberate composure. Her public outings resumed with unshaken grace, her speeches firm, polished, and unwavering. But behind closed doors, the shift was evident. She spoke less, she wrote more. Pages filled in private with reflections no one else would see. Her voice, when shared, had grown sharper, not bitter, but clearer, distilled by the sting of memory. King. Alistair noticed the change. He began spending longer hours with her in the conservatory, reading aloud or walking the grounds together. Once emotionally distant, he now showed signs of quiet attentiveness, laying a hand on hers without needing a reason. He, too, had understood the message in that music box. He didn't ask her how deeply it had cut. He simply remained beside her each day. Edward's final move came weeks later, unnoticed by most. A royal advisor with ties to Margot's media team quietly resigned. A palace grant, once extended to a production company she had been circling, was retracted without explanation. Her name was left off a list of former royals invited to the Crown's centennial banquet. No dramatic gesture, no scandalous exclusion, only the total absence of presence. Inside his office, Edward reviewed the last intelligence memo on the matter and signed it without a word. The folder was marked and filed away, archived like the fee. Others, his team stood down. The damage had been contained. The shadow that had briefly entered the Queen's birthday had been absorbed, neutralized, and swept aside with surgical grace. Across the ocean, Margot continued on with her public life smiling. On camera, photographed at events, her followers none the wiser. But in the circles that mattered most to her legacy, the silence grew louder. Emails went unanswered. Meetings quietly moved without her. Partnerships dissolved with polite indifference. And so, the music box remained locked away in the Royal archives, its melody unheard again. The memory of it lingered only in Clarissa's heart and Edward's ledger. No headlines. No outrage. Just the quiet recalibration of power executed not with anger, but with absolute precision. In the end, the Crown had not spoken. It had listened, calculated, and removed, and it had won.